Right-wing pundit and creator of the film 2000 Mules, Dinesh D'Souza, has admitted that the movie did falsely claim that the 2020 election was rigged. Further, he issued an apology to Georgia resident Mark Andrews, who D'Souza falsely accused of ballot fraud in that flick. D'Souza directed and co-produced the 2022 documentary, which alleges that these mules illegally collected and deposited ballots into drop boxes in swing states during the 2020 election. Andrews was incorrectly portrayed as one of those mules. D'Souza released a statement, writing in part, quote, "I owe this individual, Mark Andrews, an apology. I make this apology not under the terms of a settlement agreement or other duress, but because it is the right thing to do. Given what we've now learned, while I do not believe Mr. Andrews was ever identified by the film or book, I am sorry for any harm he believes he and his family has suffered as a result of the film 2000 Mules." This apology comes as Andrews initiated a lawsuit against D'Souza.
In the lengthy statement posted to his website, D'Souza acknowledges inaccurate information was provided to him about ballot surveillance, but he maintains confidence in the film's basic message that the 2020 election was not secure. True the Vote is the Texas-based firm that provided D'Souza with ballot Dropbox with surveillance footage, which appeared in 2000 Mules. The footage supposedly correlated with geopolitical cell phone data collected and analyzed by the firm, which led proof of the fraud. It turns out that's not the case. Per Dinesh himself, the surveillance videos used in the film may not have actually been correlated with the geolocation data.
I don't think there's much to say here. It's not an accurate film, so good.
Don't watch it? Yeah, look, I've been on a stage with Dinesh D'Souza before. I was moderating a debate at an event called Politicon, as well as got to see him a little bit in the green room. I'll say two things about this. One, for a documentary film like this, for him to apologize is not his usual modus operandi.
Well, he is being sued, so I don't know if there's something behind the scenes motivating it.
It's very likely he's being forced to do so. So I don't know if he deserves any credit for that. But here's the bigger picture, and I want to be completely honest here, especially for the viewers at home, for commentators and filmmakers like Dinesh D'Souza, they are profiting heavily on something that is a very big market, especially in the political right now, which is trafficking in conspiracy theories and addressing this topic, the 2020 election and the incorrect assertions that it's stolen. You can make a lot of money off of that. And for people at home wondering, are these figures like Dinesh D'Souza, and I can name a number of other names, is this performance art? The answer is yes. In fact, the Dinesh that you see publicly was not really the guy I saw privately in the green room, who I'm sure you've been in green rooms with all kinds of interesting figures in the media. Often they are a lot more reasonable and respectable and civil when you actually talk to them behind closed doors. But once the cameras turn on, all of a sudden this character emerges. And that's what happened with Dinesh D'Souza. So I want people at home to know that with films like this, they're manipulating you, they're profiting off of your fear and some of the basest emotions that human beings have. It's something that should not be platformed or should not be making money. And the thing that we can do as consumers is to vote with our attention and vote with our pocketbooks and not watch it.
Yeah, I don't know about not be platformed, but it should be criticized, certainly. To my view, the problem with the film was that, and this is a point actually Ann Coulter made in a great column about why she thought the Mules thing was bad or was a bad narrative, was incorrect, is that 2020 did not call out for an explanation. People were very upset about the trajectory of the country. The pandemic was a miserable time, and they took it out on Trump, who himself did not seem to know how to respond to COVID, at sometimes outsourcing the entire response to Dr. Anthony Fauci, at other times ranting that the states should be able to set their own policies. Well, which is it? These are very much in contradiction. So I think he himself was not playing to his strengths at that time, and so the country voted for a return to normalcy. Then they didn't get it. They were furious with what they got under Joe Biden and voted defiantly to reelect Trump 4 years later. It's not true that Democrats or the media or whoever need to cheat to win. Donald Trump won fair and square in 2016. He won fair and square this time, and he lost fair and square in the middle election. Now, you can always say every election there are some not good things that go on. There's some level of fraud, but not in one direction or the other, or not enough to change the trajectory of the election. It is true that a lot of the election policies were changed during COVID to favor more mail-in ballots because people were afraid of congregating in public spaces, and it is certainly possible that that could have had an impact one way or the other. Now, it's just the voting system. They changed the voting system, and doing that can favor one person or another, so I think it's fine to complain about that or to complain about media narratives that were unfavorable to Trump, but it was not a vote dropping or whatever the Dinesh D'Souza idea was.
Look, I was pretty involved in advocating for safe absentee voting in the 2020 election to make sure that people could actually access the ballot and not have what we had in the April 2020 election in Wisconsin, where people were standing in extremely long lines. There was a very small number of polling locations. And so the interesting thing, the story or the documentary that should be told is a story of how, in the face of unprecedented challenges, the COVID pandemic, we were ultimately able to, after some difficulty, able to, in many key states, be able to have safe vote by mail, voting at home, be able to vote early, and do so securely. And yeah, there is some tiny amounts of voter fraud out there, but it's not statistically significant. And really, the story that should be told, if someone were to really make a documentary about this, is that we had bipartisan support for doing that. The only reason why we were able to get absentee ballot requests mailed out to voters in Wisconsin is because the Republican state legislature okayed it, and some of the key Republican leaders were okay with that. It was highly inconvenient when they were supporting that, and then Trump on Twitter at the time was trashing the whole practice of absentee balloting. But the more independent-minded Republicans stayed on board with that. So, look,
that was then. This is now. Now Trump gets, I think, that that's not a good strategy for him, and that you need a ground game. You need Elon Musk convinced him, encourage early voting. Well, and now the situation is that, honestly, Democrats are the ones, the Democratic Party, Biden, Harris voters, they have diehard, they have disproportionately affluent, reliable voters. So it might not even be the case anymore that if you mailed a ballot to everyone, that's bad for Republicans. The reliable voters are ironclad Democrats. Trump has made gains with the working class, with more economically disadvantaged, less elite educated minority voters, less reliable voters, but people who are interested in voting for Trump. So yeah, motivate your early voters. Do mass turnout. That's going to benefit Republicans now.
I'm glad that Trump changed his tune when it comes to absentee voting between 2020 and 2024. It was highly unusual in 2020 because the original movement to allow for voting at home or voting by mail was led by Republican secretaries of states in states that have many rural voters that tend to lean Republican. So it's so odd that the politics of that issue flipped in 2020, and now I'm glad, I guess it's back to being maybe more of a non-issue. There's still a little bit of debate around the role of ballot drop boxes, but at the end of the day, absentee voting has been happening for decades in many states, and it's safe. I think, going back to this documentary, we are the stories that we tell about ourselves, and so which documentaries and stories we choose to tell is important. And I think it's important to tell the story that there is actually a lot of bipartisan agreement around early voting now, and even Trump is on board with that.
Still to come on Rising, we're going to talk about some more stuff. Let me just look down at my computer to see what that's going to be. Yes, a favorite subject of mine. Congress's Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic has released a report, and we're going to give you all the details on that coming up next.